the only show focused on Stars improvement strategies and the leaders who implement them. This is the Rising Stars with Rex Wallace Show, brought to you by Hyperlift.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Rising Stars, the show where Mick and I interview the brightest minds in this world of star ratings that we both live in. And today, we have one of the historically brightest minds in stars, and I feel like she just keeps getting brighter with every day that passes and every LinkedIn post she writes.
Wow.
So, however you want to measure it, right? So please welcome our co-host, Mick Twomey, and our guest today, no stranger to the show, Jessica Assefa.
And I actually want to jump in and add something on that intro you just did on Jessica, because I actually texted her about this. I've always loved looking at her LinkedIn posts. I've just thought like where she comes with a good kind of strategic kind of overview, and then, but really the tactical, what can I go do today to impact this? And, you know, frankly, I think that's, it's so beneficial in being able to pull that expertise out and share it with everybody. I think it's a wonderful thing that you do. So if any of you have not looked at her LinkedIn, there's a lot of opportunity to get some good learnings there.
Well, thank you both. I didn't even need blush today. I'm just I'm all verklempt now. Thank you.
They really are good every time, especially these last few. It's like when I read them, I'm like, oh hell, that's got to be AI. But I'm like, I'm not even gonna ask her, because I'm just gonna, it's really, really good.
I feel like I'm in a nerdy star ratings Valentine's Day card or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're very happy to have you on the show.
Happy to be here. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, you've been on here, I don't know, 3 times now, 4 times, whatever. But yeah, friend of the show, and we love having you on. But, you know, for our 3 listeners, if one of them might not know who you are, can you give a 15-second background on yourself?
Absolutely. Happy to. So Jessica Assefa, currently work as a star ratings consultant independently. I support other firms. Sometimes I have the privilege of working closely with Rex and his team, and often work close with Mick because he's all of our data go-to in this space. Been doing that for about a year. I've also worked in leadership roles at various health plans and for various other consultancies over the years in the star rating space. My genesis is as a nurse. That's how I entered the healthcare field, and always focused on geriatric populations and individuals with disabilities. So honestly, like that's where my heart is. Those are my people, and that's been kind of the common thread throughout my career. So thrilled to be here today.
Great. Yeah, great to have you back. Okay, so we're recording this episode in mid-February 2025. So let's say if you're listening to this show, you probably have something to do with star ratings, right? You're probably leading a program or supporting a program at a Medicare Advantage health plan. So here in mid-February 2025, there are many important things you're probably focused on right now. But, you know, undoubtedly one of those things is a thing that we're going to hopefully give you a masterclass on today, especially these 2. We're going to dig deep into goal setting. Again, early in the year, mid-February, and this is, you know, if you think of measure twice, cut once, or 50 other quotes like that, right? Goal setting is critical, and we're going to talk a lot about it today. And I feel like we have the right people on today. So, Mick, let's start with you. You know, why, just high level, why is effective goal setting important?
Why is it important? So I think that there are any number of reasons that this is, you know, something that the plan should focus on, especially right now. You know, one is around alignment. You know, it's about ensuring that everybody's got the same goal in mind, from the measure owners to the stars team to the leadership team, because everything essentially rolls up, right? So it's understanding how all of the different aspects from the measure level going up to where it all comes together with QI and with HEI reward factor, that ultimately these measure goals are going to lead us to the place where we need to be from an overall organizational standpoint, and ensuring that you've got accountability and buy-in across the organization, that, you know, these are collaboratively driven, based in data, but being able to, once you have this, then you better understand realistically where you're going, what you need to be able to deliver to get there. And frankly, it forces some understanding of, all the changes that we're seeing in this dynamic world and how it impacts your specific organization, all the CMS rule changes. It's one thing to understand what they are, totally different to understand how they specifically impact your organization and some of the things that are coming. How do we prep for this? So it's probably a long way of saying, really, it's about collaboration and an alignment to ensure that you have everything in place that you need to be successful.
So let's hover on a piece of that collaborative piece, right? And I keep hearing some clients over the years saying, we've got to set aggressive goals, and the people that own the measures, they're not going to be aggressive enough, right? They don't, because they have a day job. This is maybe not their day job, right? And we need them to stretch. So we need to just create the target and give it to them and hold them accountable, make them do it. Essentially, right? Why is that not effective? Either one of you.
Well,
I'll let Jessica go, and then I'll jump in.
That involves quite a bit of hubris, right? Just to begin with.
Yeah.
I think who better than a pharmacist in your pharmacy department, right? Who's developed the formulary collaboratively, probably with the PBM, who has, great influence over relationships with your pharmacies and related drug programs, who knows where the company's invested in the Part D space and what's available to communicate to members. Can we text them? Can we call them? Do we have a new vendor coming on with analytic capabilities that can stratify these people, et cetera, right? Who better than that pharmacist to help set those measure goals, to understand based on current and future investments in the Part D space and the structure of your formulary, what's possible, right? As far as adherence goes, and what's a stretch and what's just not realistic too, right? Just to add in a real life example of that, when I worked for a health plan in Oregon, our pharmacist lived right there in Oregon and was familiar with the key pharmacies that we leaned into, of course, right, to serve our members. And there was a year with quite a bit of wildfires, not quite what we're seeing in LA right now, but very similar, right? And a good number of pharmacies were impacted and closed down by these wildfires. And then there were others that members in rural Oregon really depended on as well, that were purchased and closed down by a larger pharmacy. That really changes strategy. It changes goal setting, right? To have this information. So, just to your point, to wrap up your question, Rex, and to lean into Mick's point about being collaborative, right? And involving measure leads. I think the leaders that sit in these departments, these functional departments for star ratings, are uniquely qualified to set measure goals in a way that a stars leader, who's more of a program manager across the organization, really can't do at a granular level.
Yeah, I think the collaboration piece that you both mentioned is important, right? You've got, everyone has something that they're bringing to the table. It's very important to us when we're working with plans to do the goal setting or the target setting, to bring another look at everything through different angles. One, we're going to want to come with a bit of the data and the insights, what's realistic, what's achievable, and what, from an individual standpoint, is going to aggregate us up to where we want to be. But when we host facilitated sessions and we talk through it, so because we're going to work with the STARS team and understand kind of where we need to be. But as Jessica mentioned, the measure owners, the people on the ground, they're going to have a level of insight that doesn't exist anywhere else. And you really need to get both sides of this to come out with goals that actually make sense and are going to get you where you need to be. I would say one of the biggest risks, if, like Jessica said, if the STARS team or a leadership team is setting the goals here, you're measuring performance throughout the rest of the year. And you want to make sure that everyone, top to bottom, is on board with these, so that when we're measuring performance, we're all nodding because we all agree this is where we were trying to get. If you do this in a vacuum and you do it to people instead of with people, the results just aren't going to stand where you run that risk.
Oh, for sure. For sure. With stars, like there's that top down governance, but it's informed by information that comes from the bottom up, right? Our best leaders are only as good as the people below them and giving them information to help set those goals at the highest level. I think for like our big national plans, that becomes even more of a challenge with goal setting, where you have these contracts that have contract level goals, set by corporate and the larger entities that are over all of these national plans. And the contract expands across multiple states and multiple counties that each have kind of their own unique nuances. I mean, it takes that Oregon example I just provided and magnifies it by 20. So I think, even so there, where leadership may have said we have a medication adherence issue generally that's keeping us from hitting goal, and we need to get med adherence up to 4 stars. What does that mean at the local level for each of these regional areas that roll up into that contract?
Go ahead, Rex. Go ahead, Rex.
I don't think, I know we're spending a little time on this one point, but I mean, I don't think you can overstate how important this is, right? Because this aspect isn't just about goal setting. It's about managing the matrix, right? And which is what stars is all about, right? Stars is all about, there's a stars team that sets like in wherever they set, right? Under the head of Medicare, or under the chief medical officer, or head of quality, or wherever that might be, right? But no matter where they set, the people that are owning the performance on these measures don't report to them, right? They report up to other parts of the organization, and that's all about organizational engagement, which is, I feel like, 90% of what I do in all my engagements, it comes down to that. But it's about building trust, right? Like it doesn't matter how good your goal is or how accurate your goal is. If you're not building trust in that process of even establishing that goal, building trust with that measure owner, having them trust that that you don't trust them and you're just giving them a number and saying, go hit it. I don't need you involved in the process because I don't trust you, right? I just need you to go do this. That's a different feeling and different level of motivation, which is none, versus, hey, let's co-create this goal. You are the expert, right? I know where we need to get to, but you're the expert. Let's help me figure out where we can get.
It also creates like a recipe for disaster, right? Like that was part of Wells Fargo's big downfall too, where they just set these unrealistic goals without input from leaders in functional areas for their book of business, and people did what they had to do to meet those goals, which if you do it articles wasn't good, right?
Yeah, and if you do it the right way, it's a recipe for success, right? Because you can't do it in a vacuum. You can't do it to the measure owners, but you also can't do it to the stars team. Everyone's going to bring something to the table here, and like when we're doing the sessions, we've already gone through the numbers and we come up with like this. Let's call it a starting point. A plan and a stretch target, and when we get in these sessions, we can explain the rationale, which is going to include things like this is the measure movement that has been seen in market. Right. So if you're at a 65, we're not going to set our goal at an 80 because leadership said we had to be up here. Right. You have to do what's realistic based on your performance, but it has to ultimately get you where you need to be. And so the stars team they're going to be the ones bringing in, well, we need to think about the QI threshold, significant improvement. Right. We need to think about this when we're setting it. So it's not just, measure owner, it's not just stars team, but it's the collaboration of all of that gets you to something that is achievable. It is, bought into everybody. And again, that's what's going to enable you to move the needle.
Yeah, for sure. And you have to know who you are as a plan, right? To set those goals too. So I mean, you talk about setting aggressive goals and that's not always the answer. And it isn't always the answer, but it is sometimes, right? Like, are you a new plan, a new in the market, a low performing plan, trying to catch up with the big guys? Well, then you're going to have to set some more aggressive goals, right? Your small gains aren't going to get you to your 4-star goal, versus if you're more of an established plan, you've held 4 stars or higher, maybe your focus is then more on sustainability and more realistic, stable goals. versus that aggressive attitude that a newbie would have to get up to the bar.
Well, and if you do have to have aggressive goals, how do you go after it? What is kind of like you're saying, Jessica, like based on your situation, which measures make the most sense to go after aggressively? Are there ones where you're kind of underperforming where other players are in your geography, which might tell you, you've got some internal opportunities? Or like right now, it's also understanding your situation. Are you one of these high performing plans that is about to lose 20, 30, 40 points of reward factor?
One of these,
how does that play?
9 high performing plans?
Yeah. True.
Yeah. Like go forward, see what that number looks like. Right. Especially, we've got things like the advance notice that came out, 2 weeks ago, that, maybe pretty much all the operations measures are going away. And, that is typically the highest performing measure set out there. How is that impacting your plan? If something like that goes through. And so how do you think about that? And I would offer one thought on that, if that actually happens.
High hyperlift.
The higher hyperlift. That was my thought. No. QI used to be worth like 5 points if you move like the Part C QI from a 3 to a 4, right? Then the member experience weight change comes in, and now it's like 6.5, 7 points. But then if you take away all these ops measures, that much more. And so, I think that that's probably the biggest area of focus when you're setting these goals right now, because typically the movement to get up above significant improvement is a lot less, as a general rule, than getting up to that next cut point. So if you're just focused on getting up to the next star rating, you could be leaving points on the table. So focus on that, because with those ops measures going away, QI still staying 5 weight, it's going to be that much more impactful on all of this. So I just think
absolutely,
it's an exciting time right now, and how med adherence then plays into that with all these weight changes and ops measures going away, improving, med adherence even a half a point can have a really positive impact on QI, which is then ultimately weighted more. So again, I just think there's a lot of interesting opportunities out there right now.
Yeah,
definitely. Part D QI is always my first focal point. I wrote an article about that about a year ago, I think. There's significantly less measures, right, on that Part D side compared to the Part C subset of measures. So,
and with the member experience weight change, you're right? So right. Yeah, I mean, that's the exciting thing when you start doing math path things. Right. I guess exciting is a relative term, but like when you, when you start looking at the impact of moving the med adherence measures again, like half a point, right. You can do that in a couple of different places. It's a monster impact on your overall score that I don't think that everyone is kind of thinking about as an opportunity to go after when you're kind of midstream and math pathing and all of this.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think another thing too, semi-related, I think plans often, it can get discouraging, right? Because the CMS moves the needle and internally we move the needle as our math path changes and, as our goals change, et cetera, throughout the year. And I think sometimes plans forget to celebrate and honor all those wins along the way, right? So as now you're sitting down with teams, Mick with your data and Rex with your strategists and sitting with these health plans and setting those Q1 goals. Like for Q1, this is what we know today. Here's what's possible. Here is what's statistically significant improvement for you. So we're aiming for that, right? And then you finish Q1 and maybe it's time we met some of those goals and we fell short in others and the math path changed. Mick spins the numbers again and Rex's strategy people re-strategize and things change. I think sometimes, and then the goalpost gets moved up again, right? For Q2 goals or whatever it is. And I think leaders who worked hard to meet those Q1 goals, sometimes we forget to recognize them to the leadership above and to call that out, right? We just bump up the goal higher, like, great, you met this, here's your Q2 goal. Instead of taking the time to publicly acknowledge people for the work they did and their ability to achieve the Q1 goal, and the fact that they did so well that we're able now to move the goalpost higher because of the hard work of these folks. And I think that's super important. Otherwise, it can get really discouraging working in an environment that fails to recognize that along the way.
I think it's a really good point to bring up. Rex and I are actually working with a plan right now, and you look at performance. And traditionally they've been up in a 4.5, 5-star, 4.5, 5-star performance, but because of all of the rule changes that have come in place, the score is dropping. But it's not because of performance degradation. It's just, you talked about the goalpost moving up. I kind of feel like this is like they're just kicking you back 20 yards. The goalpost is further away just because of rule changes that are happening. But if you take a step back, this is one of the things that we were going through. You look at the plan's performance; they're doing phenomenally well. But that kind of gets lost when you're seeing your numbers drop. And it's just, especially when leadership doesn't necessarily understand all the nuance, or not understand it, but they're not up on all the nuance where this is just happening because of rules changing. And again, this is kind of part of the importance of this goal setting process, is understanding that. And what can you start to put in place to at least prep for it or counterbalance some of that?
Right.
At the highest level, when I think of goal setting, I think of three things. I think of we've been using the word collaborative, so we can use that, right? So it needs to be collaborative, right? It needs to be like we've all three established pretty firmly. It needs to happen between in the stars aspect. It needs to happen between the stars team and the measure owners. And it needs to be able to be explained to leadership, right? Like why they are like this, and so that whole getting executive buy-in and support on the back end. But in the middle, is all of this stuff that we're talking about, and I just think they need to be well informed, right? The goals need to be well informed. They need to be, and that's, in my mind, that means all of these things, right? So what are the QI thresholds? What is our overall goal? Jessica, what you're saying, like what are the limitations of us as an organization, or what are our strengths as an organization, right? Are we small and we don't have provider scale? So, maybe our, anything that's provider influence, we're maybe up against the wall and not going to be able to move enough, right, to hit high stars on many of those measures. Or maybe, we're forced to, offshore our operations, and our customer service measure is 1 star, and it's probably not going to get a lot better than that this year until we are able to, bring it in house or bring it onshore or something like that. Those are just examples. They're real examples, but they're examples. So we have a client who, and Jessica, you said this too, like basically like changing the course, right? Like setting a goal, but then refreshing them and being willing and able to see when they should change, and then having the strategy in place. So we have a client who wrapped up 2024 and still has the CAPS survey this year and HEDIS and the call center measures, right, to finish up the 2026 rating. They are desperate to hit their goal for many reasons, right? Their overall goal. They do not do well in CAPS. So, and they're of a size, I think it's their size, that they don't have to field CAPS. So they were going to, Jessica, you realizing you know
Go
the
on.
story.
I'm with you.
Yeah. I forgot, but this they don't have to field CAPS, and they weren't going to field CAPS. But then we dig into their year-end data and look and basically relook at the improvement thresholds and realize, to get where they need to go, they have to have those 2-part DCAPS measures, and they have to have them to trigger QI, right? So they're fielding CAPS now, and they weren't going to, a month ago. So, but that's the kind of thing that you have to be so on top of this and be able to course correct, like at any given point in the year, in the 11th hour, in this case, right? Because the data tells you, if I'm going to have a chance of hitting this, I have to.
Yep, absolutely. And that's something a math game you're not able to play without advanced data analytics. Seriously. Without that, you just have such a myopic view to say we've tanked in caps. Caps is our Achilles heel. What a blessing to not have to, what a blessing to be able to pull that out of the equation, right? Not worry about that and not have caps dragging our scores down. Well, it's not an option, right? And you need that more comprehensive overall end-to-end program view ability to even know that that's not an option.
And you need to be able to evaluate that real time. Just pop in once this comes up, let's take a look at it. If these came out, what does that do to our scores? Like, these are the things that you need to realize at the onset so that you can make that decision and then figure out, in this case, all right, we've got to go after caps now in a heavy way.
And hot and heavy. Exactly.
So in that vein of being well informed, right? Like, and you guys have both alluded to many of these, but you need to know, like, when you're setting a goal for a measure, right? You need to know obvious things like, how have I performed in the past? What are the cut points historically done? What do we think they're going to do this year? Like all of that obvious stuff. Where's the significant improvement threshold? But one of the things we use Mick, we use your tool for, we share quite a few clients, right? So I'm very familiar with your tool, and we use it for many clients just one thing, I think this is the best practice I want to call out, and you mentioned it earlier already anyway, but what's a realistic, so let's take breast cancer screening, right? Mm-hmm. If I'm at 72% last year and I'm setting my goal for this year, and I think I need to get to 78%. Is that realistic? Like, can I, is it possible for me to do enough things to get to 78%? And one of the things that I know your tool helps plans see is, I think it's the top 30% of plans in the nation, right? That moved on this measure. How much did they move on average? So it just gives you and then there's one that shows you plans that are in your actual performance range. How much did they move, right?
So the way to do it, and then I'll bounce down to tell you exactly what the thing tells you, and then you can continue. So what it does is essentially it's to guard against, sometimes you'll get guidance that says every measure has to have a goal of 4 or 5 stars. And there's a risk to that, because if let's say we're at your example, and we took this from a 72 to a 90, I'm making up numbers, right? But now you're counting on this 5-star. In reality, that's not going to happen. And so you're counting on this to achieve your objective. Well, when that inevitably fails throughout the year, you're just automatically behind. It's better to understand that you have this limitation, and if you need to, what other measures might you have opportunity, or how do we go after it? But what the tool that Rex is talking about, what it does is, if I'm at a 72 in breast cancer screening, it's going to look across the industry and look at every plan that scored between like a 70 and a 74 in that, because you want to understand the movement that's possible in that specific performance range. If I got a 60, I've got a lot more upside opportunity than I got an 80. So this allows you to kind of look at this here, and then it tells you, in this tight performance range on this measure, if I can move as much as the average improving plan here, here's where we would set it. Or if I'm going to place focus, we can move as much as the top 30%, then it could take you all the way up here. So sorry, but that's what it shows.
So thanks for clarifying it. And so in my mind, in my experience, right, you don't need a million different data sources and to be overwhelmed with a spreadsheet of 700 numbers on it, right? When you walk into a goal setting meeting, you need to know, like, for the last few years, how have you performed on this measure, rate wise, star wise, right? How have the cut points moved, but also in the projected cut points, obviously going forward, but things like that, right? So things like something to help me understand what's realistic from a quantitative standpoint. Then you need the discussion with the measure owner and the understanding that Jessica was talking about earlier, right? Who are we as an organization? Like, that's all the subjective stuff that you need in the conversation. You need the right people in the room, the measure owner who does this every day, and the stars team. with
Yeah.
those kinds of things in their head to understand what's the human aspect of correcting this target that the math says we need to hit, right? And then obviously just understanding how each of these measure targets plays into my overall star ratings goal, how they impact my improvement measures, how they maybe impact HEI, right? It's et cetera. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that there's the like there's the numbers aspect of this that we were talking about right here, but the other side, I've done target refinement sessions with both of you guys and people on your teams, and one of the things that I really enjoy is we start laying out a number and we see, all right, this is a measure that we want to really improve, and they're like, okay, well, what should we do? And that now we've reached my level of incompetence. And so it's nice to have you guys in the room, because what I've seen, the first thing that both of you I've seen do is you ask questions. Are you doing this? Are you doing that? Like getting an understanding of what's going on behind the scenes in their world. And then it's this back and forth discussion that typically comes up with, oh, that's interesting. We haven't thought about that. Let's go back and look at that. Not that you're always going to come up with answers, but being able to come up with things to go explore, because it's one thing to set a goal. It's another thing to understand how you're going to get there if this is something that, has traditionally been a struggle.
Oh, for sure. For sure. In that same space, I think a lot of plans have star rating managers at that level, and it's all right to have a star ratings manager at that level, provided the accountability for that program rolls up to a much higher level, right? If you're using your star ratings manager as more of a PM to implement strategy and to keep all the pieces moving in the right direction at the right speed, great. But I think that accountability really needs to live at a higher level, right? You need somebody like a high level leader who's in those rooms with provider negotiations, with the formulary conversations. That's a decision maker at that level, because that determines your ability to set star rating goals, right? A star ratings manager doesn't know that going into 2025, you're now contracted closely, or you have, you're contracted closely with this large provider, or that one of your largest providers just agreed to take upside downside risk in their provider contracting. Well, that now knowing that, you're like, great, I can slide a quality gate into there, right? And I can tie these star need measures to that quality gate. And now I've got a lever to pull here. Now I know I can set goals higher for those clinical HEDIS and adherence measures than I could have without that knowledge, right? So it's just having that global cross-organizational input and knowledge is, I think, key to knowing what is attainable, right? What levers do I have to pull? And you need to know that before you can even begin to say, I can get breast cancer to 80%, or no, I can only do 60. If this guy's got a whole lot of money tied to it and 75% of your members, you can get 80, right? So
Right,
see,
yeah.
that's that gold that's never coming out of my mouth, and this is why I love this. Yeah, I love that.
yeah.
So yeah, so on that note, and so let's spend a minute here talking just to executives who are over the STARS program or over the Medicare Advantage program, or the ones who are kind of calling the shots. So we've had clients who where the executive the plan was low performing, right? Trying to climb. They were trying to improve culture. Like, I understand why they did this, right? Like, I understand the rationale. They came to the conclusion that in order to have a high performing culture, like a center of excellence for the Medicare Advantage program, they didn't want to accept a goal lower than 4 stars for any measure. I can talk about it, but I want you guys to talk. Can you guys talk about why is that a bad idea?
I mean, I'll never shut up about it, so I'm going to let Jessica go.
I'll say a little bit, and I'll hand the baton to my right. I think that happens when the people at this level don't do a good enough job robustly informing the people at this level. The people at this level are making the best decisions they can based on the information they've been provided, right? We want to get every measure to 4 stars, and that's not attainable. Why? Because United over here did it. Why we're in the same service area? Well, United did it because it's all their members and whatever, this high performing New York wealthy suburb that got, but we're here in Idaho, and this is what we can, right?
Right.
So I think it's just putting that whole package together, that information together, and bringing it to senior leadership, and even doing it. And I've worked with health plans who have done that in a formal way, right? Who've worked to really improve the structure and accountability and governance of how Star Ratings operates within their health plans. And I led a whole team who sat down, cross-organizational team, and just put together a robust pre-read packet that explained all of this, that defined who are we and who are our competitors and what are we capable of versus what are they capable of, and what's a realistic goal and what's a stretch goal, right? If they need that 4 there, if they can't sleep at night if it doesn't say 4 next to that measure, make a stretch goal column, right? If that guy needs to be happy, but
Take some melatonin.
right, take some melatonin. Yeah.
Sleep, yeah.
But just informing the folks that are deciding which direction the ship is sailing in is pretty important.
Well, you use the example, United did it, pick the plan, right? But somebody out there is a 4 or a 5 in your area. But that doesn't mean that they went from wherever you might be right now to a 4 or a 5 in 1 year. To me,
Right.
that's a big piece of this. There's only so much improvement that you can typically realize in 1 year. So
Yeah.
understanding what movement is realistic based on your unique situation, that's more impactful. Like, you're better off to set a goal at 3 and actually achieve it than to set one at 4 or 5 and miss it. And so really what you want to be able to understand is what's realistic for your organization. Because if you need a 4 to get here, but you can only get a 3, you don't want to fool yourself and tell you, all right, now we've achieved our objective from the organizational standpoint, because you haven't. You're not going to hit that. So it's better to understand where you're lacking and then figure out, are there other areas that we could go put a little bit more focus on, bump that up to give you a more realistic shot to achieve your overall objectives.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
And there's so many paths to goal attainment, right?
Yes,
I mean, there's
right.
so many mathematical paths. So we don't have to be married to this path, and if it's not proving to be the right direction after we start seeing a little more data coming in, or we've had some programmatic changes or whatever they may be. And that's where I think it's so important too, having your data team, whether that's vended out or internal, like your data leaders need to be present in those star ratings meetings, and your strategists, right? Whether you're getting external help or you're just doing it all by yourself, these folks need to be in that meeting as well, so that you can give them that information. You can say like, hey, we thought we were going to be able to get mammograms to whatever, but we can't nail that contract with the mammovan vendor or whatever it is, right? It's not going to happen for us. That your data team or vendor, if they're any good, can math you out another pathway pretty quickly. And that's a conversation you can have back and forth and find your new direction to walk in to get to goal.
And make sure, and you said this, but yeah, make sure that, or you said, I think when you first started talking about this, you said maybe this level's not explaining it well enough to this level, right? But I think pulling those math people into that conversation, right? Like,
right.
I know many of our clients, leverage their, actuarial director, or like somebody in actuary, or just a really strong stars analyst who can come in with some executive presence and help explain the math and say, we don't have to get 4 everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Let's instead, here are some places where we can stretch and get 5, we think, so that we can afford to get 2 in this 1 or 2, these 1 or 2 measures, right? So, because otherwise, and I don't know if you said this out loud, either one of you, but I know I've heard you both say it, but if you have 4 on that scorecard, on that goal sheet all year long, it's going to be red all year long,
All
right?
year.
It's never going to be green. You're never going to achieve it in the cases that we're talking about, where you've been 1 star historically. It's going to be demoralizing for the measure owner. It's going to be frustrating for the stars team. Like, nobody wants a number on there that's never going to turn green, right? Like and I'm in no way saying, I can hear some people saying, well, you're saying that we should accept low performance. You should accept realistic performance with stretch targets, right? There are, like you said, Jessica, there are different paths to your goal, and they don't have to all be 4 in every measure, right? And
Yeah,
one more thing on that, and I because is it okay? So I'm setting targets for my stars program.
Yeah.
Am I setting 4 stars for this measure, or am I setting 78% for this measure? Like rate versus star. Can you talk about that?
I'll
you
talk
can
about it.
go first, Mick. That
Okay.
sits in your wheelhouse squarely.
Well, I think it's to a degree case by case, but to a degree, I think if you look at stars as this multi-year journey, this is one aspect, right? But but no, we can't always look at this as a multi-year journey because we're getting measured next year and we're getting compensated for that performance. And so I think you want to look at um, the star rating, the expected star rating, but you have complexities that come into that with cut points that we don't know. You can project them, but there's no guarantees at all that you're going to hit it. I think more importantly, you look at that rate, and again, you've got to come back to the realistic thing. Based on my level of performance on this measure, what can I realistically expect to achieve? How much am I going to focus on this measure? We can't boil the ocean. So is this one that I'm going to put a lot of effort into? If so, I could probably move it to this. But like we try to look at what we call contribution margin. So if you look at the measure movement that is at least been demonstrated at this level of performance, where does that take you in terms of the projected cut points? Does this average movement put you above it? Then that times the weight and the star rating change shows you a contribution margin, if you will, for that measure. So if you look at that across all the measures, you can get a relatively data-driven, realistic look at what's possible, and then you make your decisions on that. I think it gives you a more holistic view, and you probably don't have to improve as many measures as you might typically do in a target setting process. One final point I'll make here on the rate aspect, why I think it's important there is the QI side of things.
Right.
And because again, bumping that up, take breast cancer screening. It's like 15 basis points in a lot of cases to get up to significant improvement. So being aware of that and focusing on the rate, I think, is very impactful if you look at it specifically around QI. And then we haven't touched on this yet, but the HEI aspect of this.
Yeah.
So I'll shut up for right now, but if we're going to get into that, we can talk more about that later.
We may have a session 2.
Yeah, right. HEI might be a session 2. Yeah, too. I think too, sometimes people forget that there's people behind the measures, right? And moving the people and recognizing the people and grouping the people based on the story the measures tell you is key to achieving goal 2. That even happened, when I worked on the nursing floor. You just start calling people the hip fracture in room 2B or whatever. Instead of that becomes everyone's name, and we all know what you're talking about. And instead of Betty in room 2B, who also has the flu and her husband died, blah, 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 right? The whole package that you need to know to send Betty home safe with the services she needs and not return and hit your plan all cause readmission measure. I think we do that when we look at stars sometimes too. It's really easy just to see measures and forget that there's people behind the measures, and forget that the measures work together to tell you a story too, right? Like if your A1C measure is struggling, right? And you can't, if you've got the data to inform that throughout the year, not everyone does. And you can see that, okay, my A1C measure is struggling. Folks are out of control. They're out of control, but I'm doing great in diabetes eye exam and in KED and in diabetes adherence. Well, maybe you have like a data flow issue, right? Maybe you need to, like, everything else is okay. You're managing your diabetic populations, just for some reason you might not be capturing it. It makes my head go that way. Let's make sure we're capturing that data robustly, right? And that it's counting towards numerator hits the way it should. Versus the other story, your A1C is also out of control, then wow, we really have an issue with managing our diabetic population. And
Right.
It is impacting how many, right? SUPD, adherence, what else is there? KED, eye exam, A1C. It's impacting 5 measures. There might be more. That's what I can think of off the top of my head. And that's what's tanking our star ratings. So we need to pull in the CMO and the chief nursing officer and that team, disease management. We need to develop some strong disease management programs that hit at the heart of whatever's keeping our diabetic populations compliant, right? And are these the same folks hitting plan all cause readmissions? I mean, you could go on forever with that scenario, but a lot of times it's the same core group of members that are poorly managed, that are tanking not only your Part D and your HEDIS measures, but that are even bleeding into your HOS measures, your improving mental and physical health, your CAPS measures, and kind of bringing the whole program down. So getting too myopic is something that's really easy to do because it's really fun to dig. And every time you dig, you unearth something new, a new tunnel, a new rabbit hole to jump down. But I think just kind of stepping back sometimes and looking from the top down is important to develop effective strategies.
And one last thing on that, and those are great examples that you both gave. When I think about the rate versus star conversation, I think like Jessica, you're talking about the member, right, and also the measure owner too, like we talked about earlier, as far as building trust with the measure owner. But if the measure owner's target is a percentage, it's a rate, they can control to some degree that, right? If it's a star, like you were saying, Mick, I mean, you got cut point projections that might or might not be right. So if they're shooting for 78 and 78 is projected 4-star, but it ends up being 3-star, and their goal was tied to at least mentally a star and not 78. Yeah. That's out of their control. They're not the ones who projected the cut points, probably, right? But if they achieve their rate, I think we should celebrate the heck out of that, right? And they did everything they could. They accomplished their goal. It didn't end up, being what the organization thought it was going to deliver as far as the projected rate, but the projected star, but that's not their fault, right? So,
right. Well, that's where you need Mick to help tell you that story, right? It's not we didn't achieve our star rate. It's we improved by this much. It was our improvement goal, and because of that, it hit QI. Exactly. And because we hit QI, we brought Part C up to this, and we brought our overall up to that. Yeah. You can find a success story out of there, a valid one.
Right.
Love that math game.
Yeah.
Well, we're up at the end here. Anything pressing that we missed that you think super important to call out before we close?
I think we should have another one of these where we kind of dig in on some of the HEI aspects of this, because I think that it's a whole nother level of complexity, but I think is really interesting and kind of powerful right now. And HOS. I think if we touch on both of those, then I think that's probably a whole nother episode right there.
There's a lot with HOS for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, especially now.
I'm excited to talk about that. I would just wrap up my thoughts though on this topic with I really believe that high performing plans have a very good understanding of who they are and what their unique offerings are in the marketplace, and have a global understanding across their organization of what levers they do and don't have to pull to achieve goal. High performing plans don't try to be united when they know that they're a smaller, I can't think of a smaller plan off the top of my head, but when they know they're a smaller plan, they know clearly who they are and they use their unique strengths to meet goal. So
and even understanding the limitations of their state, right? Like we've worked with plans and tried to move measures and realized, you know what? This state is the lowest performing statin state in the nation, or the lowest performing CAPS state in the nation, or like there are at least, somewhat ceilings, right? That you are handed, that you have no control over based on the population, the demographics, the market, the provider makeup, right? The rural versus urban environment. There a million different things, make that up. But understanding who you are, where you are, right?
Yeah, for sure. There are states where nobody is getting a flu shot. We all know those areas, right? Just forget it. You just got to let that go.
You're going to be one star.
Pull a different lever. It's not going to happen.
Okay. Well, I think that was a lot. I agree that we could easily have another one. And I think we could get into like, I can imagine plans asking about things like how do you incorporate hybrid lift into your HEDIS goals and CAPS
Right.
interventions when you don't have a monthly glide path to look at. How can you project the input? So I think there's a lot more we can talk about. I think this was a really good first episode, and we'll just leave you hanging for more.
Love it.
Part 2 will be great, and we'll all wear matching shirts again.
Yes. All right. Well, Jessica, thanks so much for joining us again, and I look forward to having you back. So thanks, everyone.
Talk soon. Thanks, Jessica. Yep. Take care.
All right, guys. Bye-bye.
As a Medicare Stars professional, you're on a mission to boost your plan's ratings. But complex data and endless metrics make it more than challenging. Enter Stars Monitor by Hyperlift, your guide to improved performance. Our dashboards pinpoint your most impactful opportunities. By focusing on what truly matters, you'll avoid the pitfall of missed targets and achieve the goal of steady improvement. Take the first step towards your Stars success story. Email results@hyperlift.com for a free demo. Stars Monitor by Hyperlift, providing speed to clarity.